China just spent over $1 billion on glass. You read that right. Not on transistors, not on the giant machines that print them, on glass. And that single, strange-sounding bet may have just exposed the one weakness sitting underneath every advanced chip on the planet. A weakness almost nobody outside the industry is talking about. Here's what makes this the most fascinating story in technology right now. It isn't really about what China built. It's about what China understood that the rest of the industry quietly overlooked. While everyone else was fighting over one part of the chip, China looked at a completely different part, the part holding the whole thing together, and realized that's where the real bottleneck was about to appear. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what that weakness is, why it's getting worse at the worst possible moment, why glass is the unlikely answer, and why a single billion-dollar bet could reshape who controls the next decade of computing. Let's get into it. For the last several years, the global conversation about chips has revolved around one thing: making transistors smaller. Who can shrink them further? Who can pack more of them onto a piece of silicon? The entire industry, and a huge amount of government policy, has been organized around that single race. At the center of that race is a machine made by a Dutch company called ASML. Its extreme ultraviolet lithography systems are the only tools on Earth capable of printing the most advanced transistors onto silicon. Each machine weighs about as much as 2 fully loaded school buses. Each one costs close to $200 million. Only a tiny handful of suppliers worldwide can build even a single component inside one. These machines are, without exaggeration, among the most complex objects humanity has ever manufactured. So the logic that took hold across much of the industry was simple: control the machine, control the chips. Whoever can't access the most advanced lithography can't make the most advanced transistors, and therefore can't lead in AI. It's a clean argument, and it has one enormous blind spot. It only holds if shrinking transistors is the only path to more powerful computing. China, quietly and very deliberately, decided that it isn't. Think of it like a race where one competitor has locked up the world's only supply of racing tires. Most teams would spend years trying to reverse engineer that tire. China looked at the track instead and built a completely different vehicle, designed for a surface those tires were never made for. That surface is called advanced packaging, and the vehicle is glass. Here's the part most people don't realize. The most powerful AI processors being built today aren't really single chips anymore. They're clusters, dozens of smaller chips, called chiplets, wired together on a shared platform and designed to behave as one unified processor. That shared platform is called the substrate. It's the foundation everything sits on. It connects the chiplets to one another, carries the electrical signals between them, and helps manage the enormous heat they produce. If the chiplets are buildings, the substrate is the ground they're built on. And right now, that ground is made of organic material, essentially a very sophisticated, highly engineered form of plastic. This is the key reframing of the entire story. China isn't trying to outshrink anyone's transistors. China is trying to replace the floor that everyone else's chips are standing on. While the rest of the industry was guarding one door, China simply walked around the building. To understand why that's such a powerful move, you have to understand what's happening to those plastic foundations right now, and why they're starting to fail at the worst possible moment in the history of computing. Here's something the chip industry doesn't put in its marketing. The most powerful AI processors ever made are being held together by what is, at its core, a very advanced form of plastic. Not as a metaphor, literally. The substrate is built from organic resins and fiberglass weaves, materials that have served the industry faithfully for decades. Materials designed for a world where chips were smaller, cooler, and far simpler than what's being built today. That world is gone. The AI chips driving the current boom are enormous. A single advanced AI processor package today can stretch beyond 8,000 square millimeters. To picture that, lay 4 standard playing cards side by side. That's roughly the surface area. And across that entire surface sit billions of microscopic connections, all communicating at once, all generating heat, and all depending on one thing: the substrate beneath them staying perfectly, dimensionally still. Here's the brutal catch. It doesn't stay still. Organic substrates expand and contract with temperature. Every time a chip powers up, heats, and cools back down, the foundation moves. Not visibly, not dramatically. We're talking shifts measured in parts per million. But at the scale of a modern AI package, parts per million isn't a rounding error. It's a slow-motion disaster. Those microscopic connections, some of them finer than a strand of human hair, begin to drift. Slowly at first, then faster, until the clean electrical path between two chiplets becomes inconsistent, then degraded, then broken entirely. Think of a long suspension bridge in a heat wave. The cables don't snap, they just stretch slightly. But if every measurement in the original design assumed they'd never move, that slight stretch is enough to throw the whole structure out of tolerance. That's what's happening inside the most advanced AI chips on Earth right now. Not a dramatic explosion, a slow, invisible drift that engineers can measure but struggle to stop, because the material causing it is baked into 50 years of production lines, supply chains, and manufacturing processes. And here's the detail that puts it all in perspective. This problem was perfectly manageable when chips were small and AI workloads were modest. But the entire trajectory of AI hardware points in one direction: larger packages, denser connections, higher power, more heat. Every single variable that makes organic substrates struggle is getting worse at the same time. So the question was never whether plastic substrates would hit their limit. The question was who would have the replacement ready when they did. That replacement has a name, and what it can do sounds almost impossible. You've probably held the answer in your hand. Not in a chip lab, not in a data center, in your kitchen. A borosilicate glass dish, the kind you bake with, survives dramatic temperature swings without cracking or warping. You pull it from a hot oven, set it on a cool countertop, and it holds its shape. That stability isn't luck. It's a fundamental property of the material. Now scale that principle down to something thinner than a fingernail. Engineer it to tolerances that can only be verified under specialized lab equipment, and you start to understand what semiconductor-grade glass substrates really are. This isn't window glass. It isn't the glass on your phone screen. It's a purpose-built material designed to solve exactly the problems organic substrates can't. Start with stability. Where plastic expands and contracts with every heat cycle, glass holds its dimensional shape with the rigidity of steel. The connections printed onto its surface stay where they were placed, through power-up, through full load, through cool-down, with no drift, no degradation, no invisible creep pulling chiplets out of alignment. Then there's connection density. Today's best organic substrates can only pack so many electrical connections into a given area before signal interference and manufacturing limits make tighter spacing impossible. Glass can support up to 10 times that density. 10 times. And here's what makes it genuinely remarkable. Signal quality improves at the same time. Organic materials absorb and scatter electrical signals as they travel. Glass doesn't. A signal that enters one side arrives at the other, cleaner, faster, and with less interference, which means chiplets can communicate more reliably without the system constantly compensating for a degraded signal. But the real unlock isn't any single property. It's what they make possible together. Once you have a foundation that doesn't warp, that carries 10 times the connections, and that keeps signals clean across large distances, you can build chiplet packages that plastic could never support. Packages stretching far beyond today's limits, where designers stop worrying about the foundation failing and start designing for the limits of physics itself. That's the prize. Not a better chip, a better foundation that makes every chip better. So if glass is this good, the obvious question is, why hasn't everyone switched already? Picture a drinking straw. Now shrink it until it's thinner than a single strand of human hair. Now imagine drilling thousands of those, perfectly vertical, perfectly parallel, perfectly spaced, through a sheet of glass the thickness of a fingernail, without cracking it and without introducing a single invisible fracture that might only reveal itself months later under operating stress. Now imagine doing that millions of times a day, at a success rate high enough to actually make money. That's the through-glass via problem, and it's the reason glass substrates have been understood in theory for years while remaining out of reach in practice. A via is just a vertical electrical connection, a channel drilled through the substrate so signals can travel between layers. In plastic, vias are punched or laser drilled through forgiving, flexible material. Glass is neither forgiving nor flexible. It's rigid and brittle, and it punishes imprecision with fractures that spread invisibly through the material until the whole substrate fails. Sometimes during manufacturing, sometimes during testing, and sometimes, devastatingly, after the finished chip has already shipped. And drilling is only the first hurdle. Those holes then have to be filled with conductive metal, usually copper, bonded to the glass without creating stress at the interface. Glass and copper expand at different rates under heat. If that interface isn't engineered perfectly, thermal cycling creates microscopic separation between the copper and the glass wall. The via still looks intact. The signal path still measures clean, right up until it doesn't. Then there's the issue engineers don't love discussing publicly: yield. The percentage of substrates that survive the full process without a defect. Early pilot lines produced yields so low that the cost per usable substrate made commercial production impossible. You can't build a global supply chain on a material that fails more often than it succeeds. On top of that, there's flatness. A glass substrate has to stay flat to tolerances measured in single-digit micrometers across its entire surface, and 1 micrometer is roughly 1/70th the width of a human hair. Holding that flatness through the heat, chemicals, and physical handling of a full production line took years of dedicated engineering just to approach. And even after a company solves drilling, filling, yield, and flatness, it still has to qualify the whole process with semiconductor customers, a validation step that can take 2 to 3 years, during which the line earns almost nothing, while the capital sits committed. That combination, brutal process complexity, punishing yields, multi-year qualification, and enormous upfront cost, is exactly why most of the industry treated glass substrates as a long-term research project rather than an urgent priority. China looked at those same barriers and saw something completely different, a moat it could cross before anyone else even arrived at the water's edge. Here's what most people get wrong about China's position. They assume China is starting from scratch, throwing money at a brand new technology and hoping state funding alone can compress decades of learning into a few years. That's not what's happening. China isn't starting from scratch. It's redirecting. There's a company called BOE. Outside the display industry, most people have never heard of it. Inside it, BOE is impossible to ignore. It's one of the largest manufacturers of display glass on Earth, the panels inside televisions, monitors, tablets, and smartphones. Its facilities are so vast that a single BOE campus can cover more floor space than many international airports. And to make display glass at that scale, BOE spent years building exactly the kind of precision, large-format glass handling infrastructure that semiconductor substrate production requires. Think about what that means. Precision glass cutting at massive scale, flatness control across large surfaces, high-volume process lines where tolerances are measured in micrometers and yield is tracked obsessively, because a failed panel at the end of a line is a direct hit to profit. The equipment categories are different, the end product is different, but the manufacturing discipline, the process philosophy, and the capital infrastructure are directly transferable. And this is the part that reframes everything. The glass substrate challenge isn't primarily a material science problem anymore. The physics are understood, the engineering principles are established. The real problem is manufacturing, handling precision glass at high volume with the process control and yield management that commercial production demands. And that's the exact category of problem BOE has been solving at scale for years. Not for chips, for screens. But the muscle memory is the same. BOE isn't alone either. Several other Chinese firms have been attacking the through glass via problem directly. The drilling, the filling, the bonding, the yield, with serious capital and real urgency. That only makes sense if the goal isn't a research paper, but production volume. And much of this has been backed by China's national semiconductor investment funds, the same coordinated state machinery that has a track record of turning strategic priorities into industrial reality, however long it takes. Numbers can feel abstract until you give them a shape. So here's the shape of this one. Since 2023, China's national semiconductor funds, combined with direct corporate investment, have directed over $1 billion specifically into glass substrate technology, not into basic research, into production-oriented engineering, yield improvement, process qualification, through glass via scaling, and the supply chain infrastructure needed for commercial volume. And here's what that number tells you, that the figure alone doesn't. Investment at that scale, aimed at that specific problem, with that level of coordination, doesn't happen because someone found an interesting paper at a conference. It happens because a strategic decision was made. A decision that this technology will define the next generation of chip packaging, and that China intends to lead it. That decision appears to have been made around 2022, at roughly the same moment much of the rest of the industry was confident it had the chip race locked up through lithography. And $1 billion isn't the ceiling. It's the foundation. A single glass substrate production line can cost between $500 million and $1 billion to build and qualify. So the money already deployed was enough to seed the process learning. Reaching full volume will require multiples of that, and in China's model, once the strategic value is proven, the capital follows. Here's why this is the most time-sensitive part of the whole story. Semiconductor manufacturing rewards the first mover in a way that compounds and becomes almost impossible for latecomers to undo. It's not just about owning the equipment, it's about the process knowledge that accumulates on a real production line over months and years of running real material through real tools and solving real problems. That knowledge doesn't transfer through patents or papers. It lives in the engineers, in the process recipes, in a team that has seen 10,000 failure modes and learned how to avoid almost all of them. Whoever reaches volume production first accumulates that knowledge first. And the customers who qualify their supply chains against that producer won't switch lightly, because requalifying costs time, money, and risk no chip designer wants to absorb without a very good reason. This is precisely the dynamic that made TSMC nearly untouchable. TSMC didn't win because it had permanently better equipment than everyone else. It won because it reached volume first, learned faster than anyone could catch up, and locked in customers whose own roadmaps became dependent on its process generations. Competitors have spent decades trying to close that gap. China studied that exact dynamic and is now trying to recreate the conditions that created it, in a part of the market the rest of the industry wasn't defending. Here's what makes this different from earlier chapters in the chip story. Most technology races have a catch-up mechanism. A competitor falls behind, studies the leader, and slowly closes the gap. Painful and expensive, but possible. That's how memory and logic leadership has shifted between countries before. Glass substrates may not work that way, because the advantage being built isn't just a technology lead, it's a compounding knowledge lead. The moment any company reaches volume production, every substrate that runs through the line teaches the process something. Every failure mode solved becomes institutional knowledge that can't simply be bought or copied. The customer who qualifies against that line builds their next chip generation around its specifications, and at that point switching stops being a purchasing decision and becomes a full product redesign. That's not a supply relationship, it's a dependency, the kind that can define an industry for decades. That's exactly why the biggest names in the field, Intel, Samsung, TSMC, and the glass specialist Corning, are now moving on glass substrates at a pace none of them originally planned. Intel has one of the longest track records in the technology and has shifted toward licensing its know-how. Samsung is running an active pilot line. TSMC revived its glass research program. Corning is positioning to supply the raw semiconductor-grade glass itself. The technology that much of the industry once filed under someday is suddenly an urgent priority for everyone. And when you zoom all the way out, here's the real takeaway. The next era of computing may not be decided by who prints the smallest transistor. It may be decided by who owns the foundation those transistors sit on. Every AI model, every data center, every autonomous system built in the next decade will run on chips, and those chips will run on substrates. Whoever owns that foundation and locks in the customers around it holds a position that's extraordinarily hard to dislodge. That's what $1 billion in glass may have actually bought, not just a product, a position. Here's my honest opinion, for what it's worth. What I find most striking about this story isn't the glass itself, it's the strategic lesson hiding inside it. The entire industry fixated on one highly visible part of the chip and built its whole worldview around controlling it. Meanwhile, a parallel path to more powerful computing was quietly being developed in a completely different layer, using manufacturing skills borrowed from an industry, display screens, that nobody was watching. The decisive move in a technology race is so often not the thing everyone is staring at. I think the hierarchy of the chip industry is going to get reshuffled more than most people expect over the next few years, and the substrate layer is a big reason why. The lead that exists today is real, but it is absolutely not locked in. This is still an open race, and whoever takes it most seriously right now is the one who will shape how it plays out. Here's the question I genuinely want your take on, and be honest, because people get heated about this one. Is it a good thing when one country pulls ahead in a technology this foundational? Because competition drives faster innovation, or does the world work better when no single place controls the infrastructure everything else depends on? There are real arguments on both sides. Where do you land? Tell me in the comments. If you enjoy these deep dives that get underneath the headlines and explain what's really happening before the rest of the world catches on, subscribe to Eastern Engine and turn on notifications. We break down the materials, the supply chains, and the strategic moves that decide who leads the next decade of technology. And there's a lot more coming. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.